Afternoon, everybody. It's time for Mrs. Ballou Reads, and if you remember last week we started this book, Time Warp Trio, Knights of the Kitchen Table by Jon Scieszka, and pictures by Lane Smith, and published by Viking Group, Penguin Group. And we read the first 5 chapters last week, and we're going to finish the book actually today. It's a thin book, and if you remember, we have the trio of the 3 boys who've met Merlin and Queen Guinevere and the Black Knight, and now they think they're going to find out if dragons and giants are for real. Chapter 6. Now, you've probably read about giants in fairy tales, and you've probably seen giants in comic books and cartoons, but you haven't really experienced giants until you've met one up close. And once you've done that, believe me, you would be perfectly happy to never, ever meet another one. I knew giants were big. I had no idea they were so disgusting. We stood on one side of the castle moat with King Arthur, Merlin, and the Knights of the Round Table. Ballou stood on the other. He was a terrifying sight and an even more terrifying smell. He towered at least 20 feet, wore no clothes except 2 bloody ox hides tied around his waist, and hid the largest and ugliest face I've ever seen behind a crazy mess of black hair. Rotted bits of meat and bone, tree branches, giant drool, and cow manure drew a cloud of flies around his beard. If the sight of Ballou wasn't enough to make you cry, the smell of him definitely was. For the first time in my life, I was speechless and a bit dizzy. "Make haste with the magic," said Merlin. "The foul air doth dull the senses." Sam nudged me and handed me a little stick he had split halfway down the middle. He and Fred had already clamped their noses with Sam's homemade clothespins. I quickly did the same. "Hey do, Mr. Giant," I said, talking through my plugged nose. "How can we help you?" And do you know what he answered? Of course you don't, because you weren't there. Well, I'll tell you the truth. He belched. A long, loud, wet, noisy, and totally disgusting burp. Sir Percival and the 3 knights closest to him raised their shields. They were too late and took the full force of that awful blast. All 4 fainted dead away. "Give Ballou 3 fair damsels to eat now, or Ballou smash castle," said you-know-who. And I almost hate to tell you what he did next. Let's just say that when he snorted, he knocked down 2 more knights with 1 blow, and he didn't use a Kleenex. Merlin gave us the hurry-up eye. I figured there was no way to stop this monster and was just about to yell, "Every man for himself and run," when Sam stepped forward. "Now, just a minute, Mr. Ballou," said Sam, adjusting his glasses. "You can't go around treating Knights of the Round Table like that." He pointed to the pile of knights covered with green giant slime. "We are 3 very powerful magicians who could wipe the floor with you if we wanted, but we're in a good mood today, so we've decided to give you a chance to have your wish come true. Right, fellow magicians?" Fred and I looked at Sam and each other and back at Sam again. We didn't have the faintest idea what he was talking about. Ballou looked just as confused as we were. "Right," we said. "Since you fairy tale giants are always asking people riddles, we decided to give you a chance to save your miserable skin by answering our riddle. If you answer the riddle, you can eat your fill of fair damsels. If you can't answer the riddle, you leave and never return. Okay?" Ballou answered in a way that is too rude to describe. We grabbed our clothespins and ducked. 10 brave knights fell like bowling pins, victims of gas warfare. "I'll take that to mean yes," said Sam. "So for all the marbles, why did the giant wear red suspenders?" "Why did giant wear red suspenders?" Ballou repeated slowly to himself. He raised an arm to scratch his head and unleashed a storm of flies and a poisonous whirlwind of armpit odor that struck down another 5 knights. Because red was Giant's favorite color." "Bzzz, wrong," said Sam. "He wore red suspenders to hold his pants up. You lose. Goodbye." Ballou shook his head and scratched it again. 2 fish heads and 1 rotten apple core fell out. Everyone held their breath. Ballou turned to go. Fred and I clapped Sam on the back. We were just about to go razz Merlin when we heard the awful sound. It was another bone-rattling, teeth-chattering, giant burp. Duh. Hey, wait a minute. You trick, Bob. Giants no wear suspenders. The angry giant turned and stomped back toward us. Even the trees shook. Bob not like little peoples what trick him. Bob crushed little peoples what trick him. Bob stepped over the moat like it was a puddle. He raised one foot, which I won't even describe because it would spoil your appetite for a week, to crush us all. We all ran for the castle. All of us, that is, except Sam. Sir Sam the Unusual stood there with his arms folded across his chest, not moving an inch. Run for it, Sam, yelled Fred. The huge, dirty foot started coming down. He's finally lost his mind, I said. All those bad jokes and riddles finally ate his brain. Sam checked his fingernails and said, well, I guess the dragon was right. I should have believed him when he told me about giants. The monster foot stopped in midair, one black and muddy big toe just inches from Sam's head. What dragons say about giants? Oh, it really wasn't very nice. I don't think I should repeat it. Bob stepped back, got down on his hands and knees. Tell Bob what dragons say about giants. Sam leaned forward and spoke in a loud whisper. Don't tell him I told you. But he said giants are big weaklings. No. Yes, and he said giants are really just giant sissies who can only smash little tiny things like people. No. I'm not kidding. He said that if you ever fought someone your own size, like a dragon, you would get your butt kicked. No, roared Bob one more time. And then he picked up 2 boulders, each as big as a car, and ground them to gravel with his bare hands. Giants stronger than anything. Crush dragons like that, too. Sam winked at us and jerked his head toward the other side of the castle. Why is he twitching? Asked Fred. Show Bob dragon. Bob show you how giant fight. Show you a dragon, huh? Said Sam, jerking his head again. Then I got what Sam wanted us to do. The dragon, Sir Sam, I yelled. The dragon is approaching from the west. Bob stood up, scratched his head, and burped. He didn't seem to know quite what to do. Well, what do you know, said Sam. This must be your lucky day. There's a dragon right on the other side of the castle. Here's your chance to show a dragon what a giant can do. There's the dragon. Sam's idea sunk slowly into Bob's thick skull. That good idea, little man. Bob show dragon what giant can do. And he charged off around the corner of the castle, knocking 3 trees and 2 huts flat, and shaking the ground for 5 miles in every direction. Everyone still standing followed Bob, not too closely, around the castle, just in time to see Smog the dragon gliding in for a landing. He was truly a terrible sight. Big, ugly, green head, trailing wisps of smoke, shimmering metal scales, huge leather wings, coiling snake body, and iron claws. Fred gasped. They are for real. Just as Smog touched down, Bob smashed into him. Sissy! He belched, and then he clamped his long yellow teeth right on the dragon's snout. Smog dug his iron claws into Bob's leg and thrashed his spiked tail. The 2 of them twisted up such a cloud of broken trees and flying earth that we couldn't see a thing. We did hear how it happened, though. Bob belched, Smog flamed, and when giant gas met dragon flame, an explosion bigger than 4 4th of Julys knocked us off our feet and rocked the entire kingdom. Huzzah! Cried King Arthur and his sitting knights. What did they say? Asked Sam with a smile. That's hooray, Sir Sam. Nice magic work. We ducked under a castle arch to dodge the pieces of fried giant and dragon meat raining down. Thou hast saved Camelot and the honor of the Round Table, said King Arthur. Ask anything in my power, and it is yours. A giant toenail fell nearby with a thud. How about getting us back home, said Sam. The last few small pieces splattered down outside in a gentle rain. Fred and I nodded, wondering if we would ever see home sweet, normal, peaceful home again. Chapter 8. Keep your eye on the ball, yelled Fred. Choke up a little. Follow through. Meet the ball. Don't try to kill it. Just meet the ball. Ready? The stable boy looked completely confused, but he nodded and gripped Fred's oat stick in a pretty good imitation of a batting stance. Fred stood on a mound at the bottom of a tall, dark stone tower connected to the castle wall. Okay, here's the pitch. Fred lobbed our homemade baseball gently toward home plate. The stable boy swung as hard as he could and missed by a mile. I caught the ball and Sam yelled, "Strike 3, you're out." All the boys cheered and began racing around the bases and yelling, "One home run, Babe Ruth, Detroit Tigers, Bo Nose." Fred walked off the mound and met us at home plate. "Do you think I didn't explain enough?" "Methinks maybe you explained too much, Sir Fred," said Sam. The guys kept circling the bases, jumping and yelling as they crossed home plate. "Full count, infield fly, suicide squeeze." "Oh man," said Fred, "this is never going to work. We have got to get out of here. This is like the Stone Age. Those guys at the banquet last night hadn't even heard of TV." "Gosh, what a surprise," I said, "considering that TV won't be invented for another 1,000 years or so." 1,000 years? I can't live without TV for 1,000 years, said Fred. "And did you get a whiff of those people at the banquet?" asked Sam. "I don't think the shower has been invented yet either." "I don't know," I said. "I think the smell might have been coming from the food." Stable boys slowed down and sat on the grass around us. "Ninth inning? Ball 4? Kill the ump?" "That's it, guys. Game over," said Fred. Sam looked at the castle walls around us. No TV. No cheeseburgers. We are 3 20th century guys time warped into the Middle Ages. Score, Squires of the Round Table, 28. Time warp trio, 0. There he is dreaming about real baseball. "Hey, nice name," I said. "Remind me to remember it if we ever get out of here alive." "Speaking of which," said Fred, "how do we get out of here?" I tossed our leather ball up and down. If somebody had let me read my magic book, I might know. "Oh, magic book, said Fred. "I barely touched your stupid book. And don't tell me we got here by magic. That only happens in dorky books." Sam looked around again. The stable boys looked around with him. "But if we did get here by magic, wouldn't we get back home the same way?" "Exactly," I said. "So all we have to do is find someone who knows magic." We looked at the guys sitting around us. None looked particularly magical. "Ah, forget that magic jazz," said Fred. "King Arthur said he'd make us Knights of the Round Table tonight. Let's do something useful while the sun is still up. Joe, you pitch, I'll hit. And tomorrow we'll explain how TV works." Sam rolled his eyes. I walked out to the mound. Birds tweeted. The sun shone warmly. It was nice in Camelot. But Fred was right. We had to get out of the Middle Ages before we went 20th century crazy. Sam crouched behind the plate. "Hum it, Joe." I wound up and fired my best fastball down the middle. Fred swung his oat bat and crushed it. The leather ball cleared the wall, still rising. "Going? Going?" And then it disappeared through one of the tiny windows in the dark tower. We heard the crash of breaking glass. 3 quick explosions rocked the tower. Red, blue, and yellow flames spit out the tower windows. The flames circled the tower, formed a cloud, and rained purple snakes, white stars, red dragons, and 100 different weird and glowing shapes that dissolved as they hit the ground. "Magic," gasped Sam. "Who dares disturb my work?" "Merlin in his tower," boomed a voice that filled the air. "Merlin," gasped the stable boys, and they were gone. "Omnia uber sub ubi," boomed the voice again. "Show yourselves, demons of destruction, and feel the wrath of Merlin." The freaky cloud began to disappear. Fred, Sam, and I looked at each other. We knew instantly what we had to do. We ran. Chapter 9. Fred, Sam, and I knelt before King Arthur in the Great Hall. He couldn't get us home, so he figured the least he could do was make us Knights of the Round Table. King Arthur tapped each of us on the shoulders with the flat of his sword, Excalibur. Queen Guinevere and the knights looked on. "I hereby dub thee Knights of the Round Table. Rise, Sir Fred the Awesome. Rise, Sir Sam the Unusual. Rise, Sir Joe the Magnificent." The assembled knights raised their swords and cheered. "Bring our newest knights their armor." 3 squires staggered forward, loading with swords, shields, and a coat of mail for each of us. Fred's eyes lit up. "Armor, swords, this Middle Ages stuff might be okay after all." Then Merlin appeared. He was wearing his robe, whispering in King Arthur's ear and holding our leather spaceball. "We're sunk now," said Sam. "He's history," said Fred. "If he even comes near us, I'll run him through with my new sword." Don't say anything, I said. Pretend you never heard of baseball. King Arthur nodded. Merlin shuffled up and looked us over with those piercing green eyes once more. Ere since you enchanters arrived, he said. I could but think you were of a time or place I had not seen before. Nope, we never heard of baseball before either, said Fred. Sam groaned. You dimwit, why don't you just throw us in the dungeon yourself? Shut up for a minute, you guys. Let Mr. Merlin talk. He was, or is, one of the greatest magicians who ever lived. Merlin bowed his thanks to me and continued. When this leathern sphere magically appeared to me this afternoon, I remembered this sphere appears in a very old and very strange book. Even I know not whence this book came. Perhaps you know something of its secret. And with that, Merlin produced from his robe a thin blue book. A book such a dark, dark blue that it looked black, like the night sky. It had gold stars and moons along the back edge and twisting silver designs on the front and back that looked like writing from a long time ago. Before any of us could say a word, Merlin opened the book to a picture of 3 guys sitting around a kitchen table looking at a baseball. A familiar pale green mist began to swirl around the feet of Merlin, King Arthur, and Queen Guinevere. Everyone oohed and ahed, thinking it was another magic trick. Merlin smiled. The mist rose, covering all. And Joseph, Arthur, you can just march right outside with that smoke bomb and smoke yourself silly with these stupid magic tricks because I have had enough. Do you hear me? The mist slowly melted. We were sitting back at the kitchen table as if we had never left. Mom scooped up an armful of wrapping paper and stormed out of the room muttering, Joe the Magnificent, my foot. Humph. Joe the Brainless is more like it. Joe the Totally Irresponsible, a fog machine disguised as a book. Why, there ought to be a law. What kind of gift is that to give a young boy? Neither Fred nor Sam nor I moved a muscle. No one made a sound until I said, Merlin? Black Knight? Answered Fred. Leo Bob and Smog? Said Sam. The 3 of us looked at each other. We looked at the book in my hand and the baseball on the table, then back at each other. Fred shook his head. No way. That stuff couldn't be for real. I'm not so sure, said Sam, wiping the last of the mist off his glasses. I wasn't so sure myself. Then I put my hand in my pocket. I felt something and pulled it out. It was a card from an old deck with all sorts of crazy pictures in it. I held it up. Queen Guinevere's magician card, said Sam. Joe, promise us you're not going to wish for anything again, said Fred. I looked carefully at the twisted silver designs and the pattern of the gold stars and moons on the night blue book. For a split second, it seemed like I could read what they said. I won't, I promised. Well, at least not until I've read the book. And that's the end of Knights of the Kitchen Table, the Time Warp Trio. They go on lots more adventures. There's a whole series of books based on the Time Warp Trio. If you're interested in reading this book or further adventures, let us know and we'll check some out to you. I want to remind everybody that tonight is our special Eyes Wild Animal program. The link is to the event is in Read Squared under events for today. You can go there. You will need the password. The password is listed right in the event. The event link is also on Facebook and on the website, but you will have to contact us for the password. I hope to see lots of you tonight. Everybody enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for listening. Bye. And live video.